Hello everybody, my name is Newcomers, and I welcome you all back to my next video here on YouTube, my next top 10 video here on YouTube. And in today's top 10, I'm going to be talking about yet another characters for a fighting game top 10 list, newcomers for a fighting game top 10 list. However, unlike the last list I did, which was for injustice to, every battle defines you, whatever it is, basically a game that's already been confirmed and a game that's going to be coming out like next year, the DC Big Fighting Game sequel, which is already been confirmed. This top 10 list, however, is going to be for a game concept sequel that has not been confirmed yet, but could potentially one day actually be, considered, made, and created. And that's for PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. And my top 10 newcomers, I would like to see if they ever decide to do a sequel to PlayStation All-Stars. A PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale 2, technically. And I wanted to basically do this top 10 list, sorry, to basically give you guys my top 10 characters I feel personally, at least my own list, this is my list, your list might be a little bit different, for characters, I would like to actually see in another PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale type Smash Brothers rip-off Sony fighting type game that weren't in the first one, either because obviously they probably weren't created or made yet, or because they just were excluded for some stupid reason that I really don't know. Not here to judge, so I have no idea, Sony, what was going on there with certain characters, but whatever. Here is going to be my top 10 newcomers for a second game in the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale series, for a sequel to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Let's start with number 10. Okay, number 10 is Velvet Crow, the new lead character in the upcoming Tales of Berseria game. Now, the reason I wanted to include her so badly, and specifically her, was more so not just marketing for the new Tales game, but because she seems to be where the Tales series is now when it comes to Sony. Now, before I go any further with talking about Tales series in general, the Tales series is mostly on Sony. It is on Nintendo as well, and it's the reason why I could see Tales getting into Smash Bros. As well. But here we're talking about PlayStation All-Stars, and a lot more of the games, a lot more of the franchise is on Sony systems. And I was contemplating on who would I include, because people would automatically say Lloyd Irving, but Lloyd Irving feels so much like a Smash Bros. Character. I would say he's the next Namco rep for Smash Bros. Then there's Chris Elbane, the original character of the series, yet that game was on the Super Famicom and the Game Boy Advance. He would make more sense than Smash Bros. Then I start thinking about more the PlayStation-oriented, Tales characters with this franchise. It's a staple. The Tales series is a staple with Sony, with the PlayStation. The games have been going back since the first PlayStation, since PlayStation 1 on the system. And I was just basically contemplating who would I include. Would I include one of the big famous characters, one of the more recent characters and stuff like that? And I was considering Soren from Tales of Zestiria, but he's not really all that interesting. And then I was considering the main characters from either Tales of Zillia game, and I'm like, they're cool characters, cool concepts and movesets and stuff. But I'm like, they might be a little too old news by the time, a PlayStation All-Stars sequel, a second game, actually comes out. And I was contemplating the lead character from Tales of Vesperia as well. And I'm like, yeah, that might make sense too, but I wasn't trying to go too old. I wanted to go for someone that could and I'm not trying to pick her just because she's advertising a new game, but because she's such an interesting character, basically kind of being some sort of Daemon-type powers. I basically looked up on her, and she's like this character searching out for revenge, and she has these demon-like powers, and she'd just be so much more different than the standard Tales character that walks around with a sword or some sort of melee weapon and attacks. She feels like she'd be different, and she's not just the newer character that ever has a new game and basically would bring light to the Tales series more and advertise it more like currently the new game, but because she'd be such a unique character in terms of moveset potential and her art design and everything that comes with her. I was not trying to go for someone that would be feeling generic and like the rest of the cast, like a generic sword user or a generic RPG user. She feels like she'd be totally different. Her design would stand out from the rest of the PlayStation All-Stars cast. It represents the Tales series, which I feel deserves to be represented in PlayStation All-Stars. The franchise has such close ties and close connections to Sony and to PlayStation. It is a third-party franchise that belongs in PlayStation All-Stars. And I picked Velvet Crow, the new character from Tales of Berseria, because not only is she the new character, and yes, I picked it partially because of advertising, partially because of the new character, but because the design is a unique character. She has a unique backstory, and she has unique powers in the fighting style that would differentiate her from someone like, Lloyd Irving, Soren, someone from Tales of Xillia, from, Cress Albane, any of the rest of the cast. Cast the characters, main characters or side characters. And that's the reason why I picked her. And I put her at number 10 because while I think it'd be cool to include her, or a Tales character in general, they're not the highest character on my list. And there are more characters from other franchises, Sony and third party, that I feel deserve to be more. But she, I felt, warranted a number 10 spot at the bottom of the list because it would be an interesting character inclusion, for PlayStation All-Stars. Now let's get on to number 9. Now here's where I might be cheating a little bit because I'm putting 3 characters in the same spot, but that's only because I'm not entirely sure which character I would specifically choose or specifically think would be the best choice for it, but these are the top 3 from it. And number 9 is a GTA, a Grand Theft Auto representation in PlayStation All-Stars. Now, Grand Theft Auto is a big, top-notch, third-party franchise in the world of gaming, and that's not just on Sony, but gaming in general. But it is a big franchise on Sony. All the way back to the PlayStation 1. It was on the PlayStation 2, on the PlayStation 3, on the PlayStation 4, on the PSP, on the Vita, and everything. The franchise has close ties and connections to Sony, to the PlayStation, and I basically picked what I think my 3 choices I would go for if I went for a Grand Theft Auto representational character in PlayStation All-Stars. I basically picked either CJ, Trevor, or Tommy Vercetti because they all seem to be like the major, more interesting characters, from the Grand Theft Auto series. Now, Tommy Vercetti, he's like the Scarface type character. Like, he would basically bring that style of fighting to his moveset. He'd be able to use weapons, melee, and guns. And he'd have like that cool swagger about him, like 80s style Scarface gangster type, mafia type character. Trevor is just an insane psycho, and you could just basically make a moveset out of pretty much freaking anything. Him just being an insane psycho using weapons and a lot of bullcrap. And then CJ would be kind of like the gangster type character that maybe you could use like summoning the gangs to shoot up the opponents or drive-bys and stuff like that. And basically still be able to beat people up melee and have his own unique fighting style where he's different enough from someone like a Trevor or someone like a Tommy Vercetti. Now, I don't know specifically who I would specifically go for, like per se, but my own personal choice, if I had to go probably specifically for one, I would probably pick either Tommy Vercetti or Trevor. But that doesn't mean CJ is left out. That's the reason why I included it as a 3-way spot, because I'm not entirely sure, because each and every one of them brings something unique to the table in terms of a moveset potential. And like I said before, Grand Theft Auto would make sense in the PlayStation All-Stars game, because it's a third party that has such close ties, connections, and historical status with the PlayStation dating all the way back to the first PlayStation. So that's the reason why I included, a Grand Theft Auto representation on my list. Let's get on to number 8. Okay, another RPG character, and that's also because Sony is a very big RPG brand. The PlayStation's a very big RPG brand. There's a lot of RPGs been on there since day one with the PlayStation. And I picked the Phantom, the protagonist from Persona 5. And now I'm going to almost sound like a broken record here, because I'm going to kind of say the same things I did with Velvet Crow for Tales of Berseria. But I picked him mostly because not only is he really kind of unique and different, but because he's the newest Persona, lead character. And Persona, just like Tales, is a very closely connected RPG franchise to Sony. Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, especially Persona, the spin-off, is so closely connected to Sony, it makes sense in a fighting game for PlayStation All-Stars. The series Persona and Shin Megami Tensei has been around since the first PlayStation, just like the Tales games, even though Tales games had games back like on Super Famicom and has had its ties in with Nintendo and Microsoft to some extent. Persona and Shin Megami Tensei is more closely tied to Sony, even though Nintendo has had some stuff too from it. Not as much as Tales, but still some. But it's still mostly a Sony franchise. And I picked the newest character, the Phantom, the main protagonist character from the upcoming Persona 5, because I wanted to represent the newest game, and I wanted to represent someone that would be unique, different, and feel new. And like I was thinking, okay, could I put the main character from Persona 3 or the main character from Persona 4? And I'm like, they'd be interesting, but they don't seem to be probably like. I mean, I'm not trying to say they're old news because they're still cool characters. And I'm, like, there are characters on my list coming up that are classical characters that have been around for a while. So this list is not filled with a bunch of characters that are on here because they're the new representation of this or the new inclusion of that. That's not this entire list. If it's looking like that so far, it's because I put these guys lower on the list. I put the Phantom and Velvet Crow lower on the list because not because they're new, but because I'm not as into their characters so far because they are new and I haven't really played the games or seen too much about them yet. In order to put them any higher, there are going to be later on down the list characters that are, you know, more historical and long-standing characters. But I put them in there because I don't really want to just go back and pull all these old characters from something like Persona. I want to pick something new so the current fans that might have not played Persona 3 or played Persona 4 might actually be able to kind of get this character. He's unique. He kind of has, like, not, I wouldn't say split personality as far as looking his character up, but he's like, he puts on a face, like as a student at school, and he becomes like this crazy trickster, juvenile, delinquent, robber type character at night. You could have that be a really interesting fighting style, something that's not generic, like using a sword or whatever. I'm assuming since it's a Persona game, he could eventually summon Personas and fight with Personas, so that would be added to his moveset as well. And just look at him. He's a complete another psycho. It'd be different. And like I said, I'm representing Persona because it's such a long-standing franchise with Sony, and I'm representing the protagonist. The Phantom is like his side character, his character name, because he seems like he'd be unique enough and standing out enough to be different enough from the rest of the cast of PlayStation All-Stars and represent a unique character from Persona, and because he's the newest inclusion and it can advertise Persona 5, which by the time this game would be out, it'd have been out already because it comes out later this year, and if we ever get PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale 2, the earliest we'd see it is probably next year. So that's my inclusion for him. He's number 8. He's that low on the list because he's not super high on my wanting list, but he's enough there just because I'd like to see more about him, especially after we probably see the actual game and see how cool or not cool he is. And that's basically my inclusion for number 8. So let's get on to number 7. Noctis from Final Fantasy 15. Now, this is going to be a controversial choice because everyone I see that wants a Final Fantasy character in this game is like, Cloud this and Cloud that, and it has to be Cloud, or it has to be Sephiroth, or Yuffie, or Aeris, or whatever from Final Fantasy VII. And I was contemplating that so bad when I was considering this list. I was thinking, okay, because they're the classic, it's the big standing PlayStation 1 RPG, Final Fantasy VII, that RPG, it pretty much got a lot of people into RPGs, especially JRPGs, I should really say there. I was going to say, okay, maybe I'll put in Cloud. And then I'm thinking, okay, Cloud's already in Smash Brothers, and I didn't exclude because of that. That's a consideration I had, but I excluded because of that. But because I wanted to go for something different. I wanted to stand out from the crowd and not just be saying Final Fantasy this and 7 this and Final Fantasy 7 that, because there are other Final Fantasies out there. And I picked Noctis partially because he's new, and it'd be kind of like the new character in the game. He has a unique, fighting style. You can kind of include maybe his group, his party, helping him fight with like his special moves, maybe them driving the car and running the opponents over, or him summoning a big giant beast to fight. And he'd be, I think, a little more of a unique character choice than just the standard Cloud choice that everyone seems to want. And I wanted to differentiate this roster from Smash Brothers, because we really don't know if Cloud's going to stay around for Smash Brothers 5 or not. But if he does, I'd rather it be slightly different with this game. And since this game is on, PlayStation 4 and all that stuff, and he's the new character and whatever, we could do that. But then you could also say, because with Final Fantasy VII Remake, we can include Cloud. But I don't really know exactly much more on that. I would rather, I'd rather be different. That's the main thing here. I'd rather be different in this inclusion. I picked Noctis not just because not really because he was a new character, but because he seems cool enough. And it's basically black-haired Cloud almost, and a different weapon type than the big giant Buster Sword. And I'd rather not see Cloud after Smash Brothers and maybe just leave him in Smash Brothers, and especially if we start seeing like Final Fantasy VII Remake or any more Square Enix representation on the NX, it'd be making sense for him to stay there, even though he has so much close ties to Sony as well, and you can include him too. But I include Noctis mostly to be different. It's not like the protagonist, Phantom, or Velvet Crow, because they're new, but because I wanted to be different. And I was considering other Final Fantasy characters, and I'm like, okay, what about not just because he's really new, but because it's like, it'd be a unique take on the Final Fantasy franchise to represent it in PlayStation All-Stars with someone other than Cloud. And that might piss people off, and people might not like it, I'm sorry. But that's how I think. I'd rather it be different and not be, hey, there's a character here that's from Smash, that was also in Smash Brothers. And every Final Fantasy main character is kind of unique in their own way, and Noctis appears to be getting that already, and people are liking the character. It'd be interesting to see him fight. He has a unique fighting style, and we could totally see him. I could totally see him fighting Sir Daniel or Nathan Drake or Sweet Tooth or Sackboy or Parappa the Rapper or Jack and Daxter. I could totally see him in there. I mean, we've seen Dante fight them too, and he pretty much almost could be like a Dante. Not, moveset potential, but in terms of like appearance-wise and everything, in terms of representation. So yeah, that's my number 7. Let's get on to number 6 now. Okay, we got Aiko and Yorda. Now, I wanted to include a Team Aiko, representation in this because it is a close and, Sony franchise, PlayStation franchise. And they're, well, not franchise, company, supporting him, because it's not, they did, Shadow Colossus in their newest, Last Guardian or whatever. I was thinking about maybe I should include a character from that, but we haven't really seen much besides the boy and the giant flying dog bird thing, and I didn't see too much fighting potential out of them, so I'm like, I cut them out. So yeah, see, there's a new character I didn't include, like the last 3 of the last 4. And I was considering between the Wanderer from Shadow Colossus and Aiko/Yorda from Aiko, and I'm like, this is their first game. There's more of a connection here, and you can have a team character. And I'm like, the Wanderer would kind of be a little bit basic because all he does is ride a horse and use a sword, and it'd be kind of generic. And I'm not saying he doesn't have a moveset potential, and that Shadow Colossus shouldn't be represented. But I went for the more unique character. You basically play as Aiko, he can summon Yorda, you can basically team up and do a double team type character. He fights with a stick, you could do team commands, and she has healing magic or something, and it would be a unique team to fight with. And they're iconic too, because it's the first Team Aiko game. It's an iconic PlayStation 2 game that a lot of people love. It's like a cult status PlayStation 2 game that a lot of people love. I've actually seen people request Aiko for this game, and I guess if you put in Aiko, you have to include Yorda because they kind of team up the entire game, and it'd be one of the first double team characters in the game. Besides, obviously, maybe Daxter with Jack, but they were more of one single character, and Daxter was just kind of on his shoulder the entire game. So that's the reason why I include them. Iconic status with the PlayStation 2, one of the big early games for the PlayStation 2. Team Aiko's first game, as far as I remember, it's what started their part of their company, part of their division in Sony, and it'd be a unique casting characters. And with the new game coming out, it's advertising the new game with the old characters, and I just really want to see him because I'm not super into Ico, but I know a lot of people that are, and a lot of people online really love that game. And they're such interesting characters, and I would love to see them in there, and I know a lot of people would too. So that's my number 6. So see, I'm including older characters, and the rest of the list does have some older characters, and when you see my honorable mentions too. So I'm not just picking characters because they're new characters or advertising or whatever, which even then when I include them like that, I didn't include them for only those reasons. I include them for uniqueness in fighting style and designs and looks and game representation and whatnot, franchise representation. So let's get on to number 5. Let's get into the top 5 on my list with Dart from Legend of Dragoon. See, a character that actually was excluded from the original PlayStation All-Stars. He was considered for the game. There was a model for him. He was about to be in. They didn't include him. So obviously he seems like he'd be a shoo-in for the second game. He'd be a shoo-in. And he'd have a unique fighting style. See, he's a sword user, see? Sword. But he also can go into his Dragoon armor and grow wings and shoot fire, you know, all his magical fire and all his abilities he has. He'd be unique. He'd be like a sword user, but he'd have so much more. All his magic, his transforming into this form, everything that comes with him on top of an iconic RPG from the PlayStation 1 that a lot of RPG fans absolutely love, and we really would love to see a sequel to it too. Bring him back, get him known by the newer RPG fans, newer PlayStation Sony fans, and then you can make a sequel after all these years that people have been clamoring for, or just remake the original, remaster it, rebuild it up from the ground up into a new PlayStation 4 type game. Unique character, demand is high. His demand, I see he's one of the most demanded characters for this game. Not the number 1, but I see him requested a lot. People wanted him in the first PlayStation All-Stars, and there's a sequel. I've seen people say, they want another one, they want him now. And you just include him. Like, he's an icon. It may be one game, but he's an iconic character when it comes to PlayStation. The PlayStation 1, one of the big RPGs in the PlayStation 1, a Sony franchise, a PlayStation franchise, first party. Include him. He is such a character that was missing from the original. And that's my number 5. Now let's get on to number 4. Let's get on to number 4. Unjammer Lammy. You know, Lammy from Unjammer Lammy. We have Parappa the Rappa. We need Unjammer Lammy, his, I wouldn't say sidekick or partner or anything, because they're two different franchises that take place in the same world, and they are technically friends, so you could technically say that. But like, include her too. Like, Parappa the Rappa is popular, and he's loved and he was obviously a demanded character and one character that made a lot of sense for the first game. Include the spin-off series to Parappa the Rappa, Unjammer Lammy. There's a lot of people that love Unjammer Lammy. And like Parappa the Rapper brings like the hip hop and rap, while with Unjammer Lammy you can bring more of a rock type moveset. She uses her guitar. She could summon her band to be playing instruments and having people do the waves or whatever, and have that police fireman dog dude come out and shoot the water. I don't know. You could do so much with her. I loved Unjammer Lammy. It was such a fun PlayStation 1 game. It's so iconic, especially for me because I grew up with the game. I grew up more with her than I did with Parappa the Rapper because I never really played the original. I played the second one on PS2. I never really played the original. I played Unjammer Lammy well before I even played the second Parappa the Rapper. And she is one of my top choices. She may be number 4, and that's majorly the reason why I include her so high. But I also include her so high because she's a unique character. She's like an extra inclusion to a franchise they already had in the first game, and people want her. I've seen people request her a lot too. Maybe not as much as Darts, but up there, pretty freaking high, and a unique moveset, an iconic Sony PlayStation character. Where they need to bring back Unjammer Lammy and Parappa and make a new game finally, for crying out loud, because we've wanted it for years. Okay, but that's my number 4 choice. Lammy from Unjammer Lammy. Add her so she can be partnering up with Parappa the Rapper. Number 3, Sora from Kingdom Hearts. My top wanted third-party character. Well, it still is mostly third-party, although technically it's both my top choices could be questionable, and that might give it away. But my top wanted third-party character is Sora, because Kingdom Hearts is so closely tied to Sony that he still makes sense for Smash Brothers, because Kingdom Hearts does have some sort of connection there with Nintendo, and if they could hopefully bring out number 3 to the NX, it would make sense for him, including in Smash Brothers 5. But for now, concluding the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, he was a missing choice third-party wise in the original because of the close connections that Kingdom Hearts has with Sony. Big RPG character, Keyblade fighting moveset, all the summons he can do, all the magic he can do, his different outfits, his different costumes, his different designs, all his fighting style he's done since the first game can be included in such a freaking unique moveset. He would be so fitting in. I could see him fighting Dante. I could see him fighting Nathan Drake and Sir Daniel and Reddick and, Fat Princess and stuff like that. I could totally see him in there. And his moveset potential is perfect. And his franchise is so closely connected to Sony. It's a top third party. Like, Final Fantasy makes sense a lot for Square Enix to have a character in the game. But Kingdom Hearts does too, because of its close ties to Sony. And demand. I have not literally seen one person that requests characters for a PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, in the first one, and now if there ever is to be a second one, that normally, 9 times out of 10, I don't normally see anyone not request Sora. Almost everyone requests Sora. And that's where he's my number 3, and I want him so bad. He's my number 1 most wanted third-party character for PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. And just, it would make a lot of sense. And it'd be especially with Kingdom Hearts 3 coming out, whenever that actually happens. Kingdom Hearts Sora is my number 3. Now we're going to get into number 2. Spyro the Dragon. Yeah, he's not really Sony anymore, so technically counts as a third-party character, which is the reason why I said with Sora that it was my number 1 most wanted third-party character, even though I technically still count him as a Sony character because he's still freaking a Sony character, and I grew up with the PlayStation 1 and playing the 3 Spyro games and loving the character so much. It was a childhood nostalgic overload. This character is he might be third-party now, but he's PlayStation to me and to a lot of people. And I mean classic Spyro. Screw the Skylanders one. No Skylanders one. This Spyro, the classic Spyro, because that's PlayStation. Skylander Spyro can just leave. No. They screwed over Spyro with Skylanders. He totally gets shoved to the side as it's just a character inclusion. They used his name to get the franchise off the ground, and then they shun him from the name. Classic Spyro, fire powers, flying around, dragon abilities, a ton of crap, and even PlayStation 2 games, and the PlayStation, even when they kind of lost, Sony lost, right? Get some of those moves in there too. It doesn't have to entirely be the first 3 games like represented. Like he still had good games during like the GameCube, Xbox, PlayStation 2 era. Include them in that. Like include a very universal, well-rounded moveset. Maybe a couple of costume designs to represent later on Spyros, not Skylanders. And there you go, you got yourself a character. Now before we get on to my number 1, here's going to be a few honorable mentions of other newcomers I would like to see in the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale 2. A lot of which could have easily made the list, but they came just a little bit short, but they're all top-notch choices to be included on the roster. Hope you guys like it. Leon S. Kennedy. My opinion for the top Resident Evil choice for PlayStation All-Stars. I was going to include Jill Valentine, but I feel she makes more sense for a Smash Brothers roster, for a Resident Evil Smash Brothers representation. Leon Kennedy for PlayStation All-Stars. Delson Rowe, new infamous lead character. Tomba, PlayStation 1 Classic. Or you can go by Tombi if you want, because that's the European name. Same character though. Lara Croft, and you can basically make it where you have like the classic designs costumes and the new remake, the reboot as costumes, and you can include both the classic Lara and the new Lara because she's so closely connected to Sony, the PlayStation. Adam Jensen, the return of Deus Ex, a big, top-notch, third-party franchise that now just got a new game and made a return on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. But still, a top-notch third-party franchise that has long history just in the gaming world and does fit Sony. So there you go. Alucard from Symphony of the Night, specifically Symphony of the Night, because that Alucard is a badass. And Castlevania does have some close connections to Sony, to PlayStation. Not as much as Nintendo, but it's there. Ezio Auditore, because he is the iconic Assassin's Creed character. Carmelita Fox, because you need another character for the Sly Cooper representation. And she would be the counter opposite to Sly. Next one. Gex, classic PlayStation 1 character. Would fit in there and make a lot of sense too. Venom Snake, or any variation of Snake as well. Maybe not specifically Solid Snake, but like Big Boss Snake / Venom Snake. I just went with Venom Snake. Metal Gear Solid 5. Unique character, but you can basically make a universal Snake character that's just basically every single freaking Snake in the book. Like Big Boss Snake, Naked Snake, Solid Snake, whatever Snake, Venom Snake. Snake. Give Raiden a partner. Dr. Nefarious. Give Ratchet his major rival, his major enemy from his franchise, unique moveset. Evil Robot. Ta-da! Sam Drake. Give Nathan Drake his brother. Would be totally an interesting character. He'd be different enough from his brother, and you kind of have both Drake brothers in the game. Ta-da! And my final honorable mention. My final honorable mention. Hatsune Miku. Yay! Because of her games on Vita and PSP and PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. And because she's so freaking popular in Japan and all around the world, and just, she makes a lot of sense. Okay, and my number one most wanted newcomer character for a PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale sequel is Crash Bandicoot! Yes! Only one character I would want more than Spyro was Crash, because Crash was PlayStation 1. And I grew up with all three of those games. They were so awesome, playing with my cousins, playing with my friends. It was a big group effort too sometimes. Cool movesets, doing his little spins, breaking boxes, getting the Wampa Fruit, getting the mask, what's his face, I forgot his name, fighting Neocortex, having his sister riding the polar bear, riding whatever, and doing all this crazy stuff. Making a moveset of it. I know he's not a Sony character anymore. I know he's not a PlayStation character anymore. I know they lost the rights to him or whatever the heck happened to him. But get him back, get the rights, do the stuff, whatever you have to do all the stuff. I don't care. He needs to be in there because he's a Sony character. Crash Bandicoot for PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale 2. And that is my top 10 Newcomers I personally want to see in the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale sequel. I hope you guys like this video. Put in the comment section what you guys think. Did you guys like these choices? Would you guys like to see these choices? Who do you specifically want to see in a sequel to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale? If we ever actually see one. And we really should, because one game isn't enough to really decide if a franchise should continue to go. The concept makes a lot of sense. A lot of iconic characters. Give it a sequel to build and improve. My name is Stephen Fun. Like I said, peace. Please subscribe if you want to. Have a lovely day. Put in the comment section what you guys think. Like I said, put in there what you want to see, what characters you want to see. And I'll see you all later in the next video. See you all later.